Okay, so the foundation of every abuse dynamic is that the abuser wants unearned benefits of some kind, usually to feed their sense of power, their sense of identity, their sense of themselves. They cannot sustain their own identity. They cannot sustain their own concept of themselves. So, what they do is they offload it onto everybody else. And so, they set up this system where the victim and then enablers or people surrounding the abuser and the victim are all reflecting a false reality back to the abuser so that the abuser can feel like what they want to be true is actually true, and it's not. And that's the reason why the core of so many abuse dynamics is the victim and the abuser arguing over reality. And often if you're the victim, you're sitting here like, how am I crazy? Like, how are we arguing about this? You might even argue about things that are fundamental to society. They're going to act like it's not. And so because the reality they want to be true isn't true, they sort of fake it by creating a group of people who will act as if that reality is correct. It's basically a cult, essentially. And so part of that is the victim is not going along with it. The victim is not giving the abuser what the abuser thinks they should have or acting toward the abuser the way the abuser thinks they should. Again, the emperor's new clothes. And so, of course, you don't often realize you're in the abuse dynamic until things have well escalated and you're sitting here and you're trying to figure out reality. And that is why confusion, honestly, is one of the first signs that you're in an abuse dynamic. So the reason why this works for the abuser is because the abuser wants to feel right, but they can't be right because they're not right. So if they can get the victim to act as if the abuser is right or to submit as if the abuser is right, it's enough for the abuser on some level to feel right. And the way that they feel right is by the victim acting in ways that makes them feel right. So even if they are not right, which they're usually not, but I mean, they might be, but it's not enough for them. Even if they were right, it's not enough for them to be right. They have to make the victim submit for them to feel right. So much of what the abuser is doing. Some of them are opportunistic and they're out for the tangible benefits. But there are some abusers who, for them, it's a psychological bolster of their identity. Or it's because they have low distress tolerance and they make everybody else manage their feelings for them. Or they want a reality to be true that has nothing to do with reality. But if they can make other people act as if it's true, that's like enough for them. Then they feel right. So regardless of whether or not they're right, the feeling is enough for them to feel like, yes, I'm right. Again, not tethered to reality. The thing, though, about abusers and abuse dynamics is that reality is there. As my friend Faith Worley says, reality, what's true is true. Reality is still real. So they end up having a bill to pay at some point. But while the victim is in this dynamic, especially when they're cut off from like adult supervision, from people outside this dynamic, it can be very confusing, and it can honestly start to make you feel like a crazy person. And also the amount that you argue escalates. So then there comes a point where you can't even engage kind of like your cognitive abilities, and you're just confused and you're exhausted and you don't even have the wherewithal or emotional bandwidth or space in your mind to even attempt to have like these arguments or conversations. Now, often a huge part of the abuse dynamic is that someone sits there and talks at you for hours. Parents, partner, friend, whomever. That is a form of psychological domination. Right? You can't, so many victims find themselves in these hours long conversations, often late at night. And you may literally be like, I want to go to bed. I'm so tired. I can't even think about this right now. Like that's when they get like a dog with a bone even. Oh, you're trying to end it now. How dare you control me? You're not letting me speak. What else? They'll act like you going to bed is some bad relationship thing, like, you shouldn't go to sleep angry and you're doing relationships wrong. Basically, because you're not doing what they want you to do. Now, on some level, generally speaking, abusers know. That level may be deep down if they have a lack of self awareness, or maybe close to the surface. Because you can't really effectively manipulate somebody unless you know what the truth is, or you are legitimately so delusional that the false reality to you is the real reality. So I think where victims get tripped up a lot is the intentional abuser. I think we now have a lot of social understanding about, the Machiavellian kind of abuser. The problem is the victim reads the abuser as sincere. The victim reads the abuser as genuine. And so they're expecting the abuser to feel like they're a master manipulating psychopath, sociopath. When in reality, the majority of abusers are not going to feel that way to the victim because, one, they're standing on relationship concepts. Two, they may not be like that all the time. And three, because they are using the relationship construct to weaponize it at the victim to get what they want from the victim. So the victim is not just dealing with the abuser, but they're dealing with their own concept of like what love is, what romance looks like, what friendship looks like, what family looks like. And so when you're dealing with somebody and they're kind of like in a slot in your mind as like, oh, this is my friend, this is my partner, this is my parents. It's not just the role, it's everything that you associate with the role. So when an abuser says to a victim like, oh, I love you, the victim believes that means certain things because of their own understanding of love. It may not have anything to do with what the abuser thinks love is or feels love is. And so there's so many layers to like how we understand other people, how we understand the world, and it can get very confusing, especially when they read to you as genuine. What I would say is to remember that someone can be genuine in a moment and then later be different. So the more unstable a person is, the more you try to read them in a like a rigid way, like a static way, like, oh, they're this way. But a lot of abusers are often unstable. They're unstable in how they feel. They're unstable in how they act toward the victim. They may have static state beliefs. So when they're angry, they think the victim is like the most terrible, worst person who's trying to do all these terrible things to them. But then when they're happy, the victim is the most amazing person, right? So if you have a person who's unstable and they feel genuine to you in the moment, they may legitimately in that moment have a moment of being genuine. That is, however, not relevant to the rest of it because they're not a whole integrated, consistent, integrated person. There's that saying, Bible verse, like a two-minded person or somebody who's double-minded is unstable in all of their ways. If they were stable, they wouldn't need other people to bolster their false reality so that they can feel like they are who they want to be or wish they were, or that that they're right when they're not. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.